Let's improve the quality of our ray trace rendering. The completed garment and ray trace rendering settings affect the render output. Let's compare the quality of two similar garments to show the differences of how a good quality garment and a poor quality garment can affect the rendering output. We will also discuss the recommended settings to use to achieve a high quality output. Before rendering a garment, we check its material and simulation settings. First, let's assure that our fabrics use high-quality texture maps and that diffuse map images are not pixelated or blurred. This poor example of a fabric texture has a pixelated image and poor heather, interwoven yarns of mixed colors, fabric tiling. If the fabric is not seamless, it may look patchy after we render it. This fabric looks much better. When we zoom in, we can see that the heather fabric tiling is more realistic. We also use PBR maps to make garments look true to life. For instance, we can add a normal map rather than using a fabric with a diffuse channel. Specular maps, roughness maps, and displacement maps can also give rendered garments a more true-to-life look. We recommend avoiding pure black and using low specular values for black or dark fabrics. In this example, we use a normal map for leather to make the texture more prominent. We use the seams available from the Add Seam drop-down menu from the Browseware Cloud library. Seams from the Browseware Cloud library already contain maps that make garments look more realistic. We should assure that any imported seam images are of high quality with seamless tiles. Remember to adjust the seam position if we apply seams to internal lines. Next, we check that the stitch construction on all edges is correct. We use the V-Race Ray Trace rendering preview to check the seams and stitch construction settings. If required, we may need to increase or lower the depth values. Finally, we check the corner seam alignment to be sure that the seams overlap correctly at the garment corners and that there are no gaps on those corners. High-quality images and correct maps make artwork and trims look more realistic. While we try to use substance artwork execution for artwork and 3D objects for trims, if neither are available, we use advanced PBR maps for the most realistic final garment rendering results. Trim details enhance the look of a garment. Here we add a label as a separate pattern piece and apply the most suitable fabric and texture for the artwork. We have also stitched a separate pattern with a faux chain edge assignable trim instead of adding the chain image on the internal line of the skirt pattern. In this example of a chain and D-ring, we use auto-generated depth maps, specular, roughness, normal, and displacement maps to create the illusion of depth. In addition to using high-quality images, we should also check that the file size is not too large, since large files may slow down V-Stitcher or be difficult to share. The recommended size at 100% for these material textures is 10 cm by 10 cm and about 300 dpi. While checking the garment, it is best practice to tidy up the workspace and prepare the file for sharing as well. Be sure to arrange all patterns neatly in the 2D window. Delete or hide any patterns that are not in use. Ensure pattern names are as required. Delete unnecessary snapshots. Delete all unused materials, and clean up any unused colorways. Here is a tip. We delete any unused materials by clicking on the drop-down menu in the Colorways workspace and selecting Delete All Unused Materials. Let's check the simulated garment so we can check whether it has been constructed properly. We make necessary styling simulation adjustments to assure that the garment fits as intended. For example, we can add double fabric physics or edge properties, such as force multiplier where needed. We check that the smaller patterns use a smaller grid size, while larger patterns use a larger grid size, since the grid size affects garment draping. While we're checking the grid size, we can also check for garment collisions. Next, let's check the lighting. If our clients or vendors use standard lighting settings, we can use those settings. Here we can see the comparison of good lighting versus poor lighting. We want to ensure that the garment is not too overexposed or underexposed. We may also want to consider if the lighting is suitable for the style we are going for. Your team's 3D experts can also create custom HDRI lighting or other lighting options to import and use in vStitcher. Now let's check the garment using the V-Ray rendering preview window. As we look at the garment, we ask, is the lighting suitable? Does the garment have any visible collisions? Do the materials look realistic with the added maps? Do the maps display as they should? Are the seams and stitch constructions suitable for the garment? After we make the final changes to the garment, we can adjust the render settings. If our clients or vendors use standard render settings, we can use those settings. Otherwise, we can use the saved render preset for a similar style to save time and ensure that our rendering outputs are uniform. In this example, we are rendering a turntable. First, select V-Ray Ray Trace Rendering. Then, select the highest rendering quality option from the drop-down menu, only available with V-Ray. If we use Blender, we input between 300 and 500 cycles in the garment rendering field. For a high-quality turntable, we can use the detailed turntable or use the custom turntable if we would like to render more views and be able to zoom in closer to the garment. Next, we check the preview window to assure that the entire garment is displayed and centered. We want to avoid the garment from being cut off when the turntable is rotated. Tip: the camera views at the top of the preview window can be used to check the preview. When we do an image render, we want to ensure that our image size is large. We recommend using about 1800 pixels by 1800 pixels. It is best to use larger DPI as well for higher resolution and less pixelation. We recommend a DPI of about 300. Tip: change the DPI value first since it affects image size. We can use the 3D camera views and save those views to render close-up images of the garment. Note: the Rendering 101 course has more information on camera views and angles. Select multiple colorways or multi-pack if needed. Click Render. And that's it! We will now have a high-quality render output. Remember that the higher the render settings, the longer it takes to produce the final rendering, depending, of course, on the computer and garment involved. We recommend using Browser Cloud Render for V-Ray for faster, higher quality rendering. For more information on this feature, which is available at an additional cost, contact your account manager. See how much more realistic the good rendering example is compared to the poor example? We can download both garment files from the download section if we would like to analyze them further. For more information, visit the Browseware Help Center website, support.browseware.com.